The next class of cruisers started by the U.S. was the Atlanta class. These ships were meant to replace the increasingly obsolete Omahas in the role of destroyer squadron leader. Where other cruiser classes were sort of mini battleships, these were more super destroyers with their main armament and armor reflecting that role. Despite the light weight of their main armament and little armor, at 6,700 tons, these ships were badly overloaded topside. Below decks wasn't much better. Especially in the first quartet, at high speeds they initially had such a severe vibration aft that it rendered the rear turrets virtually useless. Given the rapid technical advances that occurred during their construction, these ships could be divided into three subsets: the first four, the second four, and the final three. Originally just called light cruisers, they were redesignated anti-aircraft light cruisers well after the war on March 18, 1949. Atlanta was started April 22, 1940, and finished December 24, 1941. Juno was started May 27, 1940, and finished February 14, 1942. San Diego was started March 27, 1940, and finished January 10, 1942. San Juan was started May 15, 1940, and finished February 28, 1942. Oakland was started July 13, 1941, and finished July 17, 1943. Reno was started August 1, 1941, and finished December 28, 1943. Flint was started October 23, 1942, and finished August 31, 1944. Tucson was started December 23, 1942, and finished February 3, 1945. The second Juno was started September 15, 1944, and finished February 15, 1946. Spokane was started November 15, 1944, and finished May 17, 1946. Fresno was started February 12, 1945, and finished November 27, 1946. Only the first two quartets were completed in time to fight in the war. Those that fought in and survived the war were decommissioned November 1946 through July 1949. All carried 12 5-inch 38 caliber dual-purpose guns in 6 twin turrets on the center line, 3 forward, 3 aft. The first quartet had 2 more twin turrets midship, with 1 on either side. The second quartet and the final 3 dropped the midship turrets, partly as weight compensation and partly to allow the fitting of more medium and light anti-aircraft guns. As with all ships, medium anti-aircraft, light anti-aircraft, and radar were continually upgraded throughout the war. These ships were the only American cruisers that carried no aircraft. Reflecting their role as destroyer leaders, the first 2 quartets carried 2 quadruple torpedo tubes midship, 1 on either side. These were removed from Oakland and Tucson in 1944, and the last 3 post-war ships didn't carry them at all. Also reflecting their original destroyer leader role, the first 4 had sonar and depth charges for subhunting. For propulsion, they carried 4 boilers in 2 rooms on the unit principle. That is to say, the rear boiler room was sandwiched between the 2 engine rooms. This generated 75,000 horsepower on 2 shafts, rather than the usual 4 in cruisers. This propelled the ships up to 33 knots. Again, reflecting their role as destroyer leaders, armor was minimal. Side armor was up to 3.5 inches. Deck and turret armor was a mere 1.25 inches. Atlanta was christened by Margaret Mitchell, author of Gone with the Wind. She arrived at Pearl Harbor in late April 1942. After escorting a convoy to the South Pacific in May 1942, she returned to Pearl and escorted the carriers Enterprise and Hornet at the Battle of Midway. Staying with Enterprise, she escorted the carrier at the Battle of Eastern Solomons in August 1942. With Enterprise under repair, she was escorting the carrier Saratoga when that ship was again hit by a torpedo, sending her back to the west coast. At the overnight First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal, Atlanta was hit by at least one 24-inch torpedo and was sadly shot up by 8-inch, friendly fire from the heavy cruiser San Francisco, killing the admiral on her bridge. By dawn the next day, it was obvious she was beyond repair and the ship was scuttled. Juno operated in the Atlantic from her commissioning until late August 1942. Arriving in the Pacific, she escorted the carriers Enterprise and Hornet at the Battle of Santa Cruz. She was hit early in the overnight First Naval Battle of Guadalcanal by a 24-inch torpedo that knocked her out of the fight. The next morning, she joined up with the survivors and headed for repairs. As the group was retreating, Juno was hit by a submarine torpedo that blew her to pieces. Of a crew of about 700, there was eventually only 10 survivors. San Diego, being newly commissioned, joined the carrier Saratoga at the west coast and with her just barely missed the Battle of Midway. She would spend most of the war escorting carriers. In fact, she would be so busy escorting carriers, she wouldn't get a chance to upgrade her older medium and light anti-aircraft guns until late 1943. She was escorting Wasp when that carrier was sunk by a Japanese sub. She was with the carrier Hornet when that carrier was sunk at the Battle of Santa Cruz. Never being damaged or getting a chance to do anything grandiose, she was with the carriers up until the end, always in the background. San Juan joined the Pacific Fleet with the carrier Wasp in late June 1942. At the overnight Battle of Savo Island, she was patrolling the eastern approaches to Savo Sound and just barely missed the slaughter. Returning to cover Wasp, she missed the Battle of Eastern Solomons. At the Battle of Santa Cruz, she was hit by a bomb that passed all the way through her before blowing up underneath the ship, damaging her rudder. Rejoining the fleet in late November 1942, she spent the rest of the war escorting carriers. Oakland joined the Pacific Fleet in early November 1943. She spent the rest of the war escorting the carriers. Reno joined the Pacific Fleet in mid-April 1944 and spent the war escorting the carriers. In mid-October 1944, while the fleet was striking Taiwan, she was hit in the stern by an enemy plane. At the Battle of Leyte Gulf, she helped evacuate survivors from the mortally wounded Princeton. On November 3, 1944, she was hit by a submarine torpedo. Heading to the east coast for repairs, she would miss the rest of the war. Flint joined the Pacific Fleet in late December 1944. She spent the rest of the war escorting the carriers. Tucson joined the Pacific Fleet in mid-May 1945. She spent the rest of the war escorting the carriers. The second Juno, Spokane, and Fresno were all commissioned after World War II.